Super Bowl 2025. Arnold Schwarzenegger endured everything, but when beer was poured on his head, his reaction stunned everyone. An incredible scene, right, during the most anticipated match of the year. A group of drunken fans behind the legendary Arnie did not pay attention to his presence or remarks. But their last act set off a chain of events that no one could have predicted. The energy inside the Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas was electrifying. Super Bowl 2025 had drawn in fans from every corner of the country, celebrities, athletes, and die-hard supporters of the two competing teams. The stadium was packed with over 65,000 spectators, and among them, in one of the exclusive VIP sections near the 50-yard line, sat none other than Arnold Schwarzenegger. Dressed sharply in a tailored black blazer and a crisp white shirt, Arnold exuded his usual aura of confidence and charisma. Even at 77 years old, the legendary action star, former governor, and cultural icon commanded respect wherever he went. His presence at the game wasn't surprising. He was a well-known sports enthusiast, having attended numerous major sporting events over the years. But tonight, something would happen that no one, not even the Terminator himself, could have predicted. As he settled into his seat, enjoying the pre-game festivities, Arnold noticed the rowdy group sitting directly behind him. They were a mix of young men in their late 20s and early 30s, already several beers deep, loudly arguing about player stats, fantasy football leagues, and throwing around expletives without a care in the world. Their jerseys were stained with spilled drinks, and their booming voices cut through the ambient noise of the stadium. Even with the roaring crowd, their voices were impossible to ignore. Arnold sighed. He had been in the public eye for decades, so he had developed a thick skin when it came to dealing with obnoxious behavior. But this group wasn't just loud. They were obnoxiously crude, and their lack of awareness of those around them was becoming increasingly noticeable. "Bro, I'm telling you, this quarterback is garbage." One of them slurred loudly, nearly spilling his beer as he gestured wildly. "He choked last season, and he's going to choke again tonight." Another fan leaned forward, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Man, shut up. You said the same thing last year, and look what happened. You lost $500, and I still haven't let you live that down." The rest of the group erupted into laughter, clinking their beer cups together as if celebrating an early victory. Arnold tried to focus on the field, but it was impossible to tune them out. He glanced at the man sitting next to him, a middle-aged gentleman in a suit who also looked unimpressed by the commotion. They exchanged a knowing look, an unspoken agreement that this was going to be a long game. Then came the swearing. The group behind Arnold didn't hold back. Every play was met with a storm of profanity, every missed opportunity laced with expletives that echoed through the section. It wasn't just loud, it was relentless. Parents with young children sitting nearby began to glance over uncomfortably, a few mothers covering their kids' ears. Even some of the security guards positioned near the VIP area started shifting uneasily, clearly debating whether to intervene. Arnold turned slightly and caught the eye of one of the louder men. "Hey guys," he said in a calm but firm tone. "Let's keep it clean, huh? There are families here." For a moment, there was silence. The group exchanged glances before one of them let out a snicker. "Oh, come on, man," one of them said, clearly amused. "It's the Super Bowl. You expect us to sit here and whisper?" Arnold gave a small, knowing smile. "No, I expect you to have some respect," he said simply. "There are kids around. You can yell all you want, just tone it down a little." A few other spectators nearby nodded in agreement, and for a second, it seemed like the message had been received. But then, as if on cue, one of the more intoxicated members of the group raised his beer in a mock toast. "To keeping it PG for the legend himself, Mr. Terminator," he declared, his words slurring slightly. The group burst into laughter again, this time even louder than before. Arnold exhaled slowly. He wasn't in the mood to argue. He had done his part. Whether they chose to respect it was on them. The first quarter of the game played on, with the home crowd erupting in cheers as the first touchdown of the night was scored. The atmosphere was electric, but behind Arnold, the chaos continued. The group's taunts and jeers only escalated, and now, every attempt to calm them down was met with exaggerated shushing and sarcasm. It was clear they had made Arnold their unintended target for entertainment. Then the incident happened. It started as a simple overreaction. The team they were rooting for fumbled the ball, and in a moment of frustration, one of the rowdy fans jumped up too quickly, waving his arms wildly, and his full cup of beer went flying through the air. The slow-motion effect of disaster was undeniable. The golden liquid arced perfectly before landing directly onto Arnold Schwarzenegger's head and shoulders, soaking his hair, face, and expensive blazer. The crowd gasped, security tensed, and in that instant, the entire section went silent. Time seemed to freeze. The fan who had thrown the beer stood there, wide-eyed, his mouth slightly open in horror as he realized exactly who he had just doused in alcohol. The rest of his group fell into stunned silence, their drunken antics suddenly sobered by the sheer weight of the situation. Arnold sat motionless for a moment. The cool liquid dripped from his hair, soaking into his collar. His jaw tightened slightly, but his expression remained unreadable. People in the surrounding rows started murmuring, some even pulling out their phones, expecting an explosive reaction. After all, this was Arnold Schwarzenegger, one of the toughest action stars in history. Surely, this was the moment where he'd stand up, turn around, and make someone regret their life choices. But what Arnold did next shocked everyone. He slowly wiped a hand over his face, flicking off excess beer. Then, with an almost amused smirk, he turned his head toward the stunned fan behind him and simply said, "Well, at least buy me dinner first." The entire section erupted into laughter. Even people who had been completely uninvolved in the situation couldn't help but crack up at the unexpected joke. The tension that had been building for the past hour broke instantly. The man who had spilled the beer was still frozen, his face pale. I'm so sorry, man," he stammered. "I swear, I didn't mean—" Arnold held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "Relax," he said. "Accidents happen. But next time, hold on to your beer like a real champion." More laughter. The nearby security personnel, who had been moments away from intervening, relaxed as they saw how easily Arnold defused the situation. The entire VIP section felt lighter, the previous animosity forgotten in an instant. The group of rowdy fans suddenly found themselves at a crossroads. The legend they had been unintentionally provoking had just handled the moment with more class than any of them had expected. One of them, seemingly recognizing the gravity of the situation, leaned forward. "Sir, we were really sorry," he said sincerely. "That was out of line." Arnold smiled and gave a small nod. "It's all good," he said, shaking off the last few drops of beer. "Just remember, real strength isn't in how loud you can be. It's in knowing when to show respect." That moment stuck with them. And the rest of the game? The rowdy group suddenly found their volume dialed down a notch. They still cheered, still celebrated, but the crude language and over-the-top behavior disappeared. Whether it was out of embarrassment or genuine respect, they had learned something that night. As for Arnold, he simply turned his focus back to the game, the beer incident nothing more than a funny memory. And when the cameras panned across the VIP section later that night, catching his amused expression as he cheered for the game, the internet exploded. The moment had gone viral. And as the headlines spread across social media, one thing became clear. Even when soaked in beer, Arnold Schwarzenegger remained an absolute legend. The laughter still echoed through the VIP section as Arnold Schwarzenegger casually wiped the last traces of beer from his blazer. The once rowdy group behind him had visibly sobered up, not from alcohol, but from the sheer unexpectedness of the moment. They had anticipated an explosion of anger, maybe even a confrontation, but instead, Arnold had turned the entire situation on its head with humor and composure. It was a masterclass in self-control, and the ripple effects were immediate. People nearby leaned in to congratulate Arnold on his reaction. A couple of younger fans even reached out to shake his hand, expressing admiration for his ability to turn an awkward, potentially heated moment into a lesson in respect. The internet was already ablaze, with multiple fans having caught the incident on their phones, uploading clips that were being shared at an alarming rate. Meanwhile, the stadium's energy continued to build. The Super Bowl was still in full swing, with both teams locked in an intense battle. The scoreboard showed a narrow lead, and every play was greeted with roars from the crowd. But even amidst the high stakes of the game, Arnold's section had its own evolving narrative. The guys behind him, who had been loud and obnoxious for the first quarter, had suddenly taken on a more reserved demeanor. One of them, the guy who had accidentally drenched Arnold in beer, leaned forward hesitantly. "Sir, really, I want to say again, I'm sorry about that. I was just caught up in the moment." Arnold turned slightly, looking him in the eye. He could tell the guy was genuine this time. "Like I said, accidents happen. Just make sure next time, the only thing you're throwing is your support for your team." The man nodded quickly. "Absolutely, man. No more beer showers, I swear." Arnold smirked. "Good, because next time, I'll make you do 100 push-ups right here in front of everybody." The group burst into laughter, albeit with a nervous edge. They could tell he wasn't entirely joking. At that moment, a security officer approached, his earpiece buzzing with activity. He looked directly at Arnold. "Sir, do you want us to remove them?" His tone was respectful but firm, making it clear that, despite Arnold's easygoing nature, they were ready to act if needed. Arnold glanced at the group, then back at the security officer. "Nah," he said, shaking his head. "They've learned their lesson. Right, guys?" The group collectively nodded, their expressions a mix of relief and gratitude. "Yes, sir," one of them quickly responded. "Absolutely." The security officer hesitated for a moment, but then gave a curt nod. "Understood. Let us know if anything changes." With that, he stepped away, disappearing back into the stadium crowd. Arnold turned his attention back to the game, just in time to witness an incredible play unfold. The quarterback of the leading team threw a long, near-impossible pass that soared through the air, connecting with a wide receiver sprinting towards the end zone. The entire stadium erupted as the player dodged two defenders and leaped over the final tackle, landing just inside the scoring area. Touchdown! The VIP section exploded with cheers. Even Arnold found himself standing up, clapping his hands together as the energy in the stadium reached a fever pitch. The once disruptive group behind him was now cheering in sync with the rest of the fans, their attention fully focused on the game instead of their antics. It was a complete transformation. One of the fans, clearly feeling the shift in atmosphere, turned to Arnold. "Man, I gotta admit, that was some Jedi-level patience you had earlier. Most people would have flipped out." Arnold smiled. "Most people forget that anger doesn't fix anything. But respect? That can change everything." The words lingered. The group of men who had spent the first part of the night making themselves the center of attention now found themselves genuinely reflecting on what had happened. This wasn't just about spilled beer. It was about understanding that in a space as big and electric as a Super Bowl stadium, the way you conduct yourself matters. As the halftime show began, the entire stadium turned its attention toward the spectacle on the field. The massive stage was set, the lights dimmed, and then in a flash, music erupted through the speakers. This year's headliner was one of the biggest names in music, and the show was everything fans had hoped for: pyrotechnics, dancers, and a stunning visual display that left the audience mesmerized. Even Arnold found himself nodding along to the beat, appreciating the sheer artistry of the performance. The Super Bowl, after all, was more than just a game. It was an experience. While everyone was engrossed in the show, one of the young men behind Arnold leaned over again. "Hey, man, you ever think about running for president? I mean, I know the whole born in Austria thing, but still, you'd probably win." Arnold chuckled, shaking his head. "I think I've done my fair share in politics, but you don't need a title to make a difference. Sometimes, all it takes is leading by example." The young man considered that for a moment before nodding. "Yeah, I respect that." The game resumed after the halftime show, with the stakes higher than ever. The atmosphere in the stadium was electric, and as the final quarter approached, the tension was palpable. Every play mattered. Every second counted. The crowd was on edge, collectively holding their breath with every movement on the field. And then, in a moment that would be replayed for years to come, the underdog team executed a game-winning play in the final seconds, securing victory in dramatic fashion. The stadium exploded in deafening cheers, confetti rained down, and players ran across the field, celebrating a hard-fought battle. Arnold stood along with everyone else, clapping, taking in the sheer spectacle of the moment. The group behind him, now fully immersed in the experience for all the right reasons, had their arms around each other, celebrating like true fans. As people began filing out of the stadium, one of them extended a hand to Arnold. "Sir, I just want to say, I came here expecting to just get drunk and go wild, but I'm leaving with a whole new perspective. You really handled that whole thing like a boss." Arnold shook his hand, giving him a small nod. "Good. Now pass it on. Next time you see someone acting up, be the example." The young man nodded firmly. "I will." As Arnold walked toward the exit, he could hear murmurs of people still talking about the incident. Social media was flooded with footage, memes, and captions praising his reaction. One of the top trending tweets read, "Even when soaked in beer, Arnold Schwarzenegger remains the classiest guy in the room." Another said, "Imagine throwing a beer on the Terminator and he responds by giving you life advice. Absolute legend." As Arnold stepped into his waiting car, he took one last glance at the stadium lights before they faded into the distance. He smiled to himself, knowing that tonight wasn't just about football. It was about something bigger, a reminder that respect, patience, and composure could turn even the most chaotic moments into something meaningful. And that sometimes the best way to win wasn't by fighting, but by leading. Arnold Schwarzenegger sat back in his private car, watching the city lights blur past as his driver maneuvered through the post-Super Bowl traffic. The energy from the stadium still buzzed in his veins. But more than the game, it was the unexpected turn of events that lingered in his mind. He had faced chaos, absorbed an entire beer shower, and somehow, by simply staying composed, had turned what could have been a viral disaster into an inspiring moment. He had always believed that true strength wasn't about brute force but about control, and tonight had proven that again. His phone vibrated in his pocket, pulling him from his thoughts. He reached for it and glanced at the screen. Messages, notifications, and missed calls flooded his inbox. Social media had exploded over the incident. The video of the beer spilling moment had already amassed millions of views, with captions like, "The Terminator doesn't flinch. Legendary reaction at the Super Bowl. This is how you handle disrespect with class. Schwarzenegger is the GOAT, not just in movies, but in real life." He smirked, shaking his head slightly. The internet had a way of making moments larger than life. But what really mattered to him was the change he had seen in that group of guys. They had come to the game acting recklessly, but by the end, they had learned something. Not through aggression, but through example. That was the real win. Just as he was about to put his phone away, another message caught his eye. It was from an unknown number, but the text was short and direct. "You changed something tonight. Let's talk. Call me." Arnold narrowed his eyes, intrigued. He debated ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of him. He hit the call button, lifting the phone to his ear. It rang twice before a woman's voice answered. "Mr. Schwarzenegger, thank you for calling back. My name is Valerie Kent. I work with social impact initiatives in the sports industry. What happened tonight didn't just go viral. It sparked a real conversation about fan behavior, public conduct, and leadership. And I think we have an opportunity here." Arnold listened intently. He had always been selective about what he got involved in, but something about her tone piqued his interest. "Go on," he said. "We want to use this moment to create a campaign," she continued, "promoting respect, self-control, and sportsmanship at major events. Your reaction tonight set a standard, and if you're open to it, we'd love to partner with you to turn this into something bigger." Arnold stroked his chin, thinking the idea had merit. He had spent years promoting fitness, discipline, and leadership. This fit right into that philosophy. But he wasn't one to jump into things blindly. "I like where you're going with this," he said. "But tell me, what's the real plan?" Valerie didn't hesitate. "We create a message. We work with leagues, NFL, NBA, even FIFA, promoting fan etiquette and mutual respect. We tie it to real stories like tonight to show how small actions can create huge ripples. And most importantly, we get fans involved. Because the culture of sports isn't just about the players, it's about the people watching." Arnold sat back, impressed. She wasn't just thinking about a quick PR stunt. She was looking at something lasting. "All right," he said. "Let's meet." The next day, in a high-rise conference room overlooking downtown Los Angeles, Arnold met with Valerie and her team. They discussed everything, how viral moments shape public discourse, the responsibility of influential figures, and how sports could be used as a vehicle for positive change. By the end of the meeting, they had a roadmap. A campaign would launch within weeks, using the Super Bowl moment as its cornerstone. Major networks were already interested in covering it. Athletes and celebrities wanted to join. The message was simple but powerful. Respect the game. Respect each other. Asterisk, asterisk. As Arnold left the building, he couldn't help but feel energized. This had started as just another Super Bowl night. But now, it had become something bigger, something that could make a difference. Later that evening, he sat on his patio, sipping a glass of whiskey as he scrolled through the latest headlines. From Hollywood to sports leadership, Arnold Schwarzenegger's viral moment turns into a movement. He smirked and put his phone down. Life always had a way of surprising him, and he was ready for whatever came next. Arnold Schwarzenegger leaned back in his chair, the Los Angeles skyline glowing behind him as he took another sip of his whiskey. The last 48 hours had been a whirlwind of media attention, business meetings, and unexpected praise. He had faced 1,000 crazy situations in his lifetime, on movie sets, in politics, in the gym, but somehow, a simple moment at the Super Bowl had captured the world's attention more than anything he had done in years. His phone buzzed again. Another notification, another article published, another wave of reactions online. He chuckled to himself, shaking his head. The internet had turned his beer-soaked moment into something much bigger than he'd ever expected. The campaign with Valerie Kent and her team was officially in motion. They had already reached out to major sports leagues, and several had expressed interest in supporting the initiative. The NFL, in particular, was eager to get involved after seeing how much traction the story had gained. Respect the game. Respect each other. It was a simple yet powerful message, and Arnold knew it had the potential to reshape fan culture across the world. He was about to put his phone away when another call came through, this time from a number he recognized. He answered immediately. "Trey," he said. "What's the latest?" Trey, his longtime business associate, sounded energized. "Arnold, you're not going to believe this. We just got word that a major network wants to do a primetime special on this whole thing. They want to sit down with you, maybe even bring in some of the guys from the Super Bowl incident and talk about the impact of that night." Arnold raised an eyebrow. "They want to bring those guys in?" "Yeah, the whole transformation angle," Trey explained. "One of them reached out to us. Actually, said he wanted to publicly apologize and share how that night changed his perspective." Arnold nodded slowly. "Now that's interesting." He thought back to the young man who had spilled beer on him, the nervous look on his face when he realized what he had done, the way he and his friends had slowly changed their behavior after that moment. He had seen a genuine shift in them. Maybe bringing them into the conversation would actually mean something. "Set it up," Arnold finally said. "If they're serious, I'll talk to them." The next few days moved fast. The network locked in the primetime special, and the producers worked with Arnold's team to coordinate everything. The idea was to present not just the viral moment itself, but the larger discussion it had sparked about fan behavior, public respect, and the role of leadership in sports culture. By the time the night of the special arrived, anticipation was at an all-time high. Social media had been buzzing about it for days. The studio audience was packed, and millions were tuning in from around the world. As Arnold stepped onto the stage, the applause was deafening. He took a seat across from the host, a well-respected journalist who had covered everything from political debates to major sports events. "Arnold, welcome," she said with a warm smile. "I think it's safe to say you've had quite an interesting week." He laughed. "I've had a lot of interesting weeks in my life, but yeah, this one has been pretty unique." They started by rolling the infamous Super Bowl clip. Even though he had already seen it a dozen times, Arnold watched with fresh amusement as the beer splashed over him. The stadium gasped, and then his reaction. The smirk, the iconic, "At least buy me dinner first." The audience erupted in laughter and cheers. "What was going through your mind in that moment?" the host asked. Arnold leaned forward slightly. I've been in a lot of intense situations, on movie sets, in politics, even in bodybuilding competitions. And in all of those moments, the one thing I've learned is that you can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you react. I could have gotten angry. I could have caused a scene, but what would that have done? Instead, I chose humor, and it changed everything." The host nodded. And that choice led to something much bigger. You've now launched a campaign aimed at promoting respect and better behavior in sports. Can you tell us more about that? Arnold smiled. Yes, respect the game. Respect each other. It's a simple message, but one that I think is really important. Sports bring people together, but they also bring out emotions, sometimes good, sometimes bad. What we're trying to do is remind people that passion doesn't have to mean disrespect. You can cheer for your team, celebrate, get excited, but don't forget the people around you. And some of those people around you that night are actually here, the host said, turning to the side of the stage. We have two guests joining us who were part of that group sitting behind you at the Super Bowl. Please welcome Brandon and Jake. The crowd clapped as two young men walked onto the stage, clearly nervous but also determined. They took their seats next to Arnold, exchanging quick glances with him. Brandon, Jake, the host said, "Thank you for being here. I think the first thing on everyone's mind is, what was going through your head that night?" Brandon, the one who had actually spilled the beer, cleared his throat. Honestly, at first, we were just being loud and stupid. We weren't thinking about how we were affecting other people. And when the beer thing happened, I swear it wasn't on purpose, but the second I saw it hit Mr. Schwarzenegger, I thought, this is it. My life is over. Laughter rippled through the audience. Jake added, "We expected him to turn around and just lose it on us. But when he didn't, when he made that joke instead, it was like, whoa." It made us stop and actually think. The host leaned in, and since then, you've both reached out to Arnold's team. Why? Brandon took a deep breath. Because that night changed something for me. It wasn't just about a beer spill. It was about realizing how we act in public, how we treat people. That moment made me rethink the way I behave, not just at games, but in life. The audience was silent for a moment, absorbing his words. Jake nodded. We wanted to apologize. But more than that, we wanted to be part of this movement. We know we were part of the problem that night, and now we want to be part of the solution. Arnold patted both young men on the shoulder. And that's what it's all about, he said. Growth, learning, moving forward. The interview continued, diving deeper into the campaign, the power of public behavior, and the ripple effects that one small moment could have. By the time the special wrapped up, it was clear that this wasn't just a fleeting viral sensation. It was the start of something real. As Arnold left the studio that night, he checked his phone one last time. Messages poured in, people from all over the world sharing their thoughts, their own experiences, and their support for the movement. One message in particular stood out. It was from an unknown number, but it was simple and direct. "You didn't just handle that moment. You changed the game." Arnold smiled, put his phone in his pocket, and walked into the night, knowing that this was just the beginning.